Good morning, good afternoon.
Maybe even evening. Welcome.
Welcome.
Good to see you all. Great that you're here.
Again, I would invite all of us to just take a moment, take a breath, arrive in this space. And we would like to invite you to appreciate this moment of transition from your private space to this shared space. And maybe just take a moment for yourself to consciously review this transition, how you perceive. You are still in the same spot. You are sitting on the same chair like before. You are at the same computer like before, the same desk properly before, the same room like before. But before, just a minute ago or two, you were in a private space, probably on your own. Now you just did 2 clicks on your computer and something changed. And we would like to bring your awareness to what changed in your awareness, not your thoughts about it, but your experience of the change. These moments of transition are very precious moments because they highlight the difference.
The subtle difference.
The subtle difference.
And actually take a moment to look at the faces that we're all with. To scroll through the pages a little, get a sense of who all's here, that we're here together. From many parts of the world. And we're all sitting on the same earth in these different places.
If you want to, you also can put the place, the city, the state, the country behind your name so that people also can appreciate the place that you are from.
Okay. We want to again review where we've been and where we're going. So while you're in the midst of that, bring your attention back to the center, to us, to our engagement here together. We're making one primary point that has a lot of repercussions for how it is that you do your deep connected work, your co-creative work, your counseling and therapeutic work, your workshops. And that is that the space that we're in online calls out on our consciousness, our awareness and intention to be able to hold it together. That online we don't have the same cues that we have when we're working with each other. We had a teacher this morning say that she can tell by being close to her students physically whether they're getting what's going on or not, and online she's having more difficulty doing that. It changes how we make sense of things, how we understand things is changing. It's a new medium, as we say over and over again. It's a new context, and we have to bring our capacity to sense, our capacity to be conscious into this new medium to bring it alive. And in doing that, what we notice is that there is something else that is more available here than often in interactions that are face to face. And that is this sense of shared presence. That because we don't have those other cues, we meet, you could say, in being. And that being becomes almost tangible.
So we again and again focus on this because from our perspective, this is the main thing we work with, this awareness of the shared space. This is the main capacity to work with. This is the main mean to bring us together. Because one of the big differences, or the big difference between an online meeting and an on-site meeting is in an on-site meeting, we have a place where walls, ceiling, a room holds us together, and where we are protected by a physical place. We don't have that here. There are no walls around us that hold us together. There is no ceiling. There is no floor. We are in a place that is an online place.
And in that, we actually are bringing our private spaces into public, and we mentioned that repeatedly. Also, that the space that you're in, that was just a moment ago your private home, your private office, your private space, is now open and available to all of us to be with you in. And that is also a big difference. We are creatures who respond to context unconsciously. We know when we enter different kinds of spaces that different behavior is called from us and expected from us. Like we use the example of going into church. You don't, when you go into church, there's often a quiet that descends. It has to do with the consciousness in the church itself, but it's also something that we recognize as how one is in church. When you go into a grocery store, there isn't the same sense of the same feeling. So here we are both shifting from our private context, which is the one that we're in on screen, and a being together that is created simply by our awareness. And we're emphasizing this because you are counselors, therapists, workshop leaders. You are doing deep connective work with people. And this dimension of consciousness, or this dimension of presence together, is the dimension of connectivity in this modality.
Because the starting point is our own awareness as a facilitator of this space. And that allows us to work with this space. But then the second step is our capacity to invite others to this space. Because as walls are holding us in a physical room, it is our shared awareness that is holding us in the conscious room. When we are together aware that there is a space of togetherness, there's a dialogical space, there's a relationship space between us. When we are holding this together in consciousness, then this space is alive. So we are dependent on each other. And our capacity to evoke this space between all of us creates this space. So that's the reason why we again and again in different ways emphasize this, talk about this, and invite you also to see how you yourself can evoke this space so that people can enter this space and build this space. The primary capacity to do online dialogical work is to create a shared space. The means to do this is to create the consciousness of it. As in Tai Chi is the saying, the energy goes where the attention goes. So when we put our attention to the shared space, our shared attention, the energy is held by the shared space that we are holding. It's not in our private space anymore. It's not in our living room anymore. It's not in our office anymore. It's in this, what we are creating here right now. This is the main skill that we want to talk about and that we want to share with you.
And so we will keep focusing on this and keep inviting you to engage with this and to think about it in your own context, your own work. And we're also in this session, we're going to speak about how do you design for presence. How do you create these spaces in your own context? The kinds of things that what are the kinds of things that you need to do in order to be able to create this kind of space? What things do you need to be aware of at a more practical level? Things like lighting and the lighting on you. Is your face able to be seen? Are the people that you're with, can you see them? What space are you in? How you create rhythm in your group to allow for the breathing room that allows people to be present.
And also one thing, we don't want you to replicate us, how we invoke the space. Because we do this for a certain setting, that is this course. What you are doing, presumably, is a very different setting. It can be very practical, it can be very personal, it can be therapeutical, it can be spiritual, whatever it is. There are different ways that are appropriate in the particular setting that you are in to invoke this space. So we choose the way we talk right now because we find this appropriate for this certain setting. We don't imply that this is the right way for all kind of settings to talk about. There are certain settings where you talk about a we space and it's just an odd thing to do. So our invitation is not to replicate what we are doing right now. We do this because we think, hopefully it's true, that this is a helpful way to evoke the space between us. We ask you to rely on your own expertise, on your own knowing, and on your own environment. What is the right language to bring people together in the acknowledgement that they are in a relationship space that you want to hold the meeting together in?
I think what we would like to invite you to do now is to help us open this space, to take the initiative and with curiosity, you can unmute yourself and invite us into this shared space. Let's see if we can build on what we have already from this course, from this session already, and invite. Libby.
Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hello to everyone.
Morning.
Morning to everyone.
Good
morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Afternoon.
I mute everyone because our idea was not to open all the microphones at the same time, but one by one to take a minute and invite us in your way into the space that we are holding together.
That we share.
And if someone wants to start, please start. But the idea was not to open all microphones at the same time, because otherwise it will be difficult to hear each other.
Good morning, all the way from Richmond, Virginia.
And Lily, can you invite us into this space? How would you do that?
I'm sitting here on the second floor in my house, and I'm looking out at a beautiful magnolia tree with white blossom, big white blossom. And it's about 75 degrees outside. It's a beautiful morning. And I have a fan going here because it's warm. And just a beautiful morning to be here with all of you. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
I would like to say welcome to my heart this morning. And I am so pleased to be in your hearts.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, friend.
Welcome.
Thank you, Alana.
Oh, I didn't know. Welcome to Arizona and into my private space. I welcome you and all of you.
Thank you.
I am sitting on my back porch, and I hope you can hear the birds with me.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we do.
I'd like to invite everybody to take 3 deep breaths together. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And breathe in all the way down. And breathe out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia.
Thank you.
Greetings. Oh,
Before we continue, just a
Yes.
comment. So we had a diversity of voices and places.
Hmm.
And then Sophia brought us to the same thing, which is our breath. That balance between diversity, which is exciting and makes one curious, and the connectedness shared together are things to work with in the way you design the work that you do online.
And also one distinction that we find very important when we invite to this space, the space that we are in here in Frankfurt is part of the space. But the space that we are inviting you to is not the space in Frankfurt. It's the space that we are sharing here online. So the language that we are using, of course, it has to include us as we are sitting here in Frankfurt. So it's part of it. But to see the distinction, as soon as we not only talk about here we are sitting in Frankfurt and there's a beautiful tree outside and it's afternoon and it's sunny, that's part of the space. But as soon as we go that there is a space that we share all here, there are 120 people online seeing each other, the space changes. It's not just Frankfurt. It's not just London. It's not just Minnesota. It's a space that we are all together in online. And the art of holding this is to acknowledge that there is this very strange space that is not somewhere physical in anywhere in this place. Somehow it spans all these spaces. But part of what makes the difference is to acknowledge that there is a space that we all share. And it's not a space where I'm sitting, it's not a space where you are sitting, it's the space in between where we are meeting. And our invitation is to invite us to this space.
Mm-hmm. So I was thinking how when all of your faces showed up and we were invited to look across, that there was great anticipation before I came to the meeting. But once I saw you, I felt my heart opening and a deep welcome, even to those I hadn't really heard from. So I'm wondering if you might check into your own experience of how that felt for you. I mean, you don't have to answer that question, just to experience what that was for you. And what it was about this space, maybe, that is between us that makes that possible.
And that's nice, Janet, because you're inviting everyone into a question, into an inquiry. Like when you saw each other's faces, something lights up. How's that possible? What is that? That's something that we're sharing. Someone, you can just unmute and join and unmute and invite. Maureen, we just muted because there was some background noise. Want to unmute again?
Oh, is it Maureen or is it me? So should I wait?
Yeah, you
go ahead, Jean.
Oh, okay. I'm just filled with joy. When I came on and I recognized some of the faces and the names, I was like, oh, hello. My heart, it was just full. And it was like, hi, we're all together again, and smiles and reaching just I could feel the love. I could feel this inviting, and I'm just full to be in this space. I've been sharing with people, and just the incredible journey of even these couple days has shifted the way I desire to show up even with myself. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Beautiful, Jean. And isn't it amazing that love is love, care is something of the essence of that which is between us here. Isn't that an amazing thing? Because it's not simply your love, nor is it my love. It's something that is sort of beyond us as individuals and yet very, very much deeply who we are. And it's almost a miraculous thing.
Maureen, you still want to invite us?
I'll just sit here with you for a while and let my day begin with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I had an experience this morning as my alarm went off, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll just turn over and go back to sleep. But then I thought about this experience, and all of us were getting up and getting ready to come together. And so, in a way, I could feel us preparing to gather, to come to this place, even before we were on screen together.
I am moved by the expansiveness in my own experience as I have felt in to the me and the we space. So my morning started with connecting to the space, the more private space I'm in, that has a feeling of greater connection to nature and to the earth. And then as I joined you, I am feeling into this space expanding. As I experience my heart expand, I can feel a rhythm, almost like a pull of earth and heartbeat that becomes expanded beyond even the container of your beautiful faces and spaces. It's expanded to the roots of the trees and the rhythm and the heartbeat and breath of the trees and the breath of the birds and the breath of all being. And I invite you to notice how that feels in your body. For me, it's a very expanded heartbeat, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie.
There are some people who raised their hand who feel more comfortable to raising their hand. So I also want to get back to them if they still want. So Isabel, if you still want to come in.
And then we can come to you, Jen.
Hi. I'm here, wide open, listening deeply to each of you. Welcome. Thanks for welcoming me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I am here and feel wide open because we are from all over the globe. And I am so struck to see and almost touch a woman from Minneapolis, a place that I have heard so much about in the last weeks and read so much about. and that common community where I feel I might almost have more in common with some of you than with some of my neighbors. And the other focus for me is on the shared intent. We do have a shared intent, and we came here because of that, all of us. And it feels like being at home, even though I don't know anybody. I've been in the morning group, and still it feels like being at home.
Thank you, Hedda. Jen, did you want to invite us in?
Sure. There's a way for me that there is a physical space building from Katie's that I feel in a grounding. So I just maybe invite you to put your feet flat on the floor if they're not. And just imagine that you're a tree and connecting the roots of the tree deep into the earth. And there's an image that I so love for spaces like this, that if you connect them deep enough that they actually, you can imagine like the science about forests that's coming out, that the root systems are deeply entangled and support one another. And so there's an image that I so appreciate for a space like this, where we are literally around the world, but if we imagine our roots going deep enough that there is actually almost a physical connection that holds us and creates a container in that way. I find that really moving. So I invite you to just feel into that if it feels appropriate for you. Thanks.
Thank you, Jen. And actually, you're pointing to something, and I think so is Katie, something that we find very fascinating about this space and coming together in across the globe, across our Mother Earth, that this space seems to be allowing us to build an actual consciousness of our globality, of our concreteness on Earth, that we are each here on Earth in a different place, and to somehow, in looking at each other's faces, looking at the places where we're all coming from, realizing that our feet are on the same earth, that Mother Earth is below us, Father Sky is above us, and it's the same sky and earth everywhere. And yet across this big span of space that gives us starts to give us an actual consciousness of the fundamental non-separation of this whole biosphere, amazing life organism that we're part of.
Because we are often talking about the disadvantages of meeting online. And there are many. But this is one of the advantages of meeting online that we also should appreciate, because it's really a new experience for humanity. We're talking about global consciousness. Usually global consciousness is a kind of a concept or a beautiful idea. But what we're doing right now is in some way very different. We are aware that we are really literally sitting around this globe. And when you were guiding us through this exercise, putting our feet on earth, we were doing this around the globe. So there's a physicality that we usually don't experience in our intuition. That somehow the globe as a whole, earth as a whole, becomes part of us as we are talking. And just to appreciate that, first, because it's a beautiful new space to be in, I always find it very touching to be so intimately aware of Earth between us, and us being on her together in the consciousness of it and us. And at the same time, it's also a very particular way that connects us. Because all of a sudden, my physical body and your physical body is connected in one physical reality. That is this round ball called Earth that is holding all of us. It's a different physicality because it's much beyond my body, but it includes my body.
And it's beyond our comprehension in size.
And it's just a hypothesis of mine, but I think it will help us to learn to come together on a global scale, to be aware of this togetherness in this very intimate way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think.
Can I
What?
jump in on this one?
Shadi, yeah.
Just you mentioned Father Sky as well, and so my invitation is to be with your feet connected to Mother Earth, embodied, and also to invite your spirit into Father Sky and to connect in spirit around this globe as well, using the air, using the space above us, that we're also within together. And the invitation to be here together today, as well as to be together going forward.
Yeah, nice, beautiful, very beautiful. I don't know if to notice, like Shadi, when you said that, your connection with those two transmits, and your connection with Mother Earth, Father Sky, the space above us that we're sharing, as well as the earth below us. There is something then created between us that is that space. And that's part of what you hear in people's invitations. The more deeply one is connected with this, with this betweenness, this openness, this consciousness, this awareness of our presence in one way or another that we're describing it, the more one's language then is able to evoke it and make it more strong. And that's so that as a facilitator, as in opening the space, your own connection and with the betweenness, with the groundedness, with the spaciousness, is what then is invites others into the same space, into that awareness also. And it's a very powerful thing. Yeah, thank you.
Could I add on to what Shadi shared?
Sure, Pam.
I actually would like to invite everyone to close their eyes, if that's okay. So, with your eyes closed, place your hand over the center of your chest. It doesn't matter which hand. And imagining that there is a beautiful ball of light, it can be any color that you want, underneath your hands in the center of your chest. And now seeing how this light is a point on the larger globe that is Mother Earth, zooming out all the way until we see that we are all points of light, joined together, contained together in this expansive bubble of love and togetherness. And realizing that this ball of light, that is you, that is all, that is we, is always within you. I thank you and I love you.
Thank you, Pam.
Thank you.
But as we've said, how you do this depends on the context that you're in. What language you use, what words you use will depend on what kind of space you need to create. So we'd like to break into groups and to give you a chance, for those of you who haven't been able to speak, to give you a chance to experiment with this, because this is, as we keep saying, this is where, in the small groups or in breaking the silence into the main room here, is where you test and try out your capacity to be connected to and offer presence.
So we will invite you to groups of 5 to 6 people, and you will have 15 minutes. You will also have a timer where you see the minutes on, and we would like to just invite each other to this space and just be aware what is this space that it's opening up between you, and just see how this online space, this intersubjective space, is what we're working together on. This is what, in whatever kind of meeting you are, this is what's holding your dialogue. This is what's holding your conversation. And there are different ways how to do this. In a more secular context, you have to use a secular language to hold this. In a spiritual context, you use different language. So find the appropriate way how to do this here, but also be aware that it depends on context to context to create this space between us and to work with it. And we just want you to share this experience, investigate this, and also see how this is the foundation, how to create an online meeting.
And an online deep meeting, an
Yes.
online real connection meeting. And we experiment, give everyone a chance to evoke the space, to call the space into deeper presence, so that and each of you, knowing the context that you're in, think about how would you do that, and use this as a way of practicing.
And just as a help in language to also kind of create some discrimination in your experience, I would like to also use a word that we find very helpful. It's called the third factor. Because when you go into a space like this, there's, as we said, the I, and this always has to be part of it. I have to be here to be with you. And I have to be with you to be with you. So there's this I, but I really have to appreciate you, all of you. And there's the wholeness of the whole space. If we call this the third factor, we can appreciate its ownness, because there's me, there's you, but there's also the wholeness as a third factor. So when you kind of work with this space, be aware of these 3 dimensions, the I dimension, the you dimension, and this third factor of this we space.
Okay.
Okay.
So you have 15 minutes and enjoy.
We're still waiting for everyone to come back.
Everyone to pop back.
Here we are. Now everyone is coming.
Good. Right. We obviously want to hear from your groups, but first, before that, just to point out something technically about the breakout groups. You have the option on Zoom to have people go directly into a breakout group, so all of a sudden you're there, or to choose to go in. And we have selected it so that you click on that little square and enter. That gives you control, and the participants in your group that you're working with control of as to when they enter the space. And that can be a nice feature. Sometimes between one activity and another, people need just a minute before they enter, because it is quite an intimate and right there space. So to give people the control when they enter or not might be something that choice to do it or not to do it will also depend on what you're trying to create between people.
It seems a tiny difference, but I'm sure you experienced it yourself. It makes all of the difference that I have a choice to enter a room or not, or if I'm thrown into a room. It's a very different experience of show up if I can take a breath and say, yes, I go, or if I'm just thrown into it. And this is a different starting point, and that's why we suggest to use the option where people have the choice and can say, okay, now I'm ready, I go. And we just invite you to do it this way.
Okay. And what we would like to hear from you about something new that you learned about in inviting and opening the space, evoking this space. What did you learn in this last group? And for those, we had a couple people who just joined us. We were just having groups for 15 minutes about sharing the experience of inviting and evoking the space between us. I hear birds.
That's me. I was very much aware of being invited, or whether someone talked about inviting me, but never actually offered me the invitation and created the space to join.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's an incredibly important distinction, and it's that if you're talking about it, or you could say from it, from the space as a way of inviting people into the space, versus I want you to come into that space over there, and it's interesting that when we start to work and develop our subtle perception of this shared space, of this awareness, this collective presence, we start to become more and more sensitive to when someone is talking about it rather than being with it.
And also to make aware, it's not necessarily the different language that you're using.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
It's the place where you're using the language from.
Mm-hmm. Genau.
A relationship to the other, otherwise you cannot propose an invitation. And you have to have a relationship to this space, otherwise you cannot invite to this space. So it's your capacity to have this double relationship, the space to the other and the relationship to the space. And then I can say, I want to invite you to this space. And if you have this relationship, this double relationship, it can be authentic. So it's you who is carrying it. Language is helping, but it's you who is carrying this.
I sometimes like to think about it as yeast. You know, we have, here we are, we're all the bowl of flour, and I bring the yeast. And the yeast is this connectivity that makes things rise. And that's the role of the facilitator in this space.
So thank you, Libby.
And we would like to, and this, we're doing this as a training and asking you to unmute yourself and join the conversation, being respectful of the fact that there are almost 120 people here, that we need space to take in what each person has said, and in this, holding this space in mutual respect, to come in and offer something that continues the conversation, that allows us to go deeper together.
I'll try to jump in. I'm Mary. I'd like to respond to what Thomas said
Ich glaube, das muss man echt machen.
about the ability to click enter the breakout room. Because if this was a physical meeting, I would probably, in between, I'd go to the bathroom, get a drink, walk around a little, and I see that being able to click, it's like opening the door. I get to open the door to the room when I'm ready. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. So again, we want to do this in two ways. People can speak directly in, but we also want to appreciate people who prefer to raise their hands. So there are already some people who did raise their hands, so I would invite Julie to come in and please unmute your microphone.
Yeah, hi everyone. This discussion of invitation is making me think about trying to make spaces that are more trauma informed, which for me is a recent thing I'm learning about. But one of the things I've been taught is that in our goal of making safer spaces is to remember that people are coming into these spaces with all kinds of experience, and that sometimes being told to do something, or in the case of breakout rooms being assigned, for some individuals that can create some type of instability. And so I am super grateful for the invitation to accept those invitations to the rooms, and the option to decline it if that's what someone needs in that moment to not participate and stay in the main group. And yeah, like for example, someone in my group, they invited us to do some mini body work, and they prefaced every invitation with "if you feel comfortable," and I think that's so important, because it seems like such a subtle difference to say, if you feel comfortable, if this is what works for you in this moment, then you're welcome to participate. But if not participating is just as valid, and you are just as valid in this space, whether you participate like others do. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie. Just to add to what you're saying, it's that kind, depending on the kind of population or groups that you're working with, these different these ways of entering and how you do it will be guided by that. So if you know you're working with in a situation of trauma counseling, that's one thing, but also recognizing, as you're saying, that all of us are walking around with trauma, and some of us much more than others, and to be aware of that. But there's also another reason to ask, to invite people, and that is that because we're working here with consciousness and not together physically, that when we invite people to make a choice to enter, we are amplifying the consciousness of the whole, because we are asking people to make a conscious choice to accept, and that already puts an intention and puts our attention in the intersubjective, in the collective realm, and that helps build the tangibility of this space.
Again, it seems to be a subtle difference, but if I have the choice to say yes and no, saying yes changes the space that we're together dramatically, because everyone who came said yes. They may be very aware of it or not so aware of it, but all of us said yes. And this changes the space. And as this space, even more than on-site gatherings, is so much consciousness-based, the atmosphere changes because of that.
And one more thing, that also means that people who are struggling or feel triggered by something in the space can turn off their camera. They can leave the space very quickly. They don't even have to negotiate getting out the door of a room. And that's also a good thing. That's an empowering thing. When if that's what you need to do, you can do that. And that may be something that you want to make very clear at the beginning of a workshop or the work that you're doing.
As we do have some hands up, I would like to call one other hand, which is Avalon Yvonne, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yes, here I am. And I would like to say thank you very much on my group, because it was so beautiful that we come together with 4 persons all over the world. And first we are getting slowly in touch, and then we sing together in an energetically language with totally wide open heart, and we have not seen each other before. And yes, I was allowed to invite my group to sing this energetically song with them, and it was so beautiful because they all was very present. And one of these beautiful people invited me to sing another phrase with them together. And it touches me because they are interested, feeling a little bit more of this kind of inviting somebody else. And yes, and the other ones from the group invited us also in a very gentle kind of being, and this was a beautiful experience. Thank you very much for you both and for all of us. Thank you.
I just want to point out that part of what we're speaking about is working with diversity, meaning diversity of experiences, diversity of locations, places, people, and integration. And the modes of integration, one could be singing together, breathing together, meditating together, being in silence together, but this interplay creates greater coherence in the space that we're sharing. So these are all tools to use depending on your context to be able to make to be able to deepen and make more tangible the connection between us. Marge, would you like to speak?
I have a question that I suppose is technical. When I have you on speaker view, it is as though you are looking directly at me. And I wonder if there is a little secret to that, a kind of camera, or because when I look at gallery view, so even now, do you get that because you look at the camera, but if I look at the camera, I don't see the people? How do you do it?
I think it's, I don't know, I think we're just realizing that this is something happening, really. I mean, oddly enough, I think it's because we don't look with our eyes, really. If that makes sense. We're not looking at our eyes for eye contact. We're looking from what we're in together. And somehow I think that creates a different sense of being connected with even
it's such a presence you bring. Oh, I thought
there's no trick behind it.
Okay.
There's no trick, at least no trick that we are aware of.
Our camera's up there.
Our camera is where usually camera is. But it's maybe because you know, also from Gestalt therapy, I think there's somebody who mentioned this in this group yesterday. There's a certain view where you don't focus sharp, but you
soft eyes.
You have soft eyes, and when you are more looking in a listening way, if I may put it this way, you are looking in a listening way. You don't focus on someone, but that's at least what we try. We try to be with all of you as we talk to every single one of you.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to put it. That so hold all of us in an engagement with each of us, and that creates a different sense of connection, because the connection is not not just simply visual.
But it's interesting also, Marge, that you are commenting on this, and this is maybe a personal remark, but it's maybe helpful anyway, because when people are commenting that we do hold kind of a presence there, it's maybe also related that our attempt is really to do what we were talking before, to be aware, of course, of ourselves, to be authentically here, because of you, to relate to you, Marge, as I'm talking to you right now, but at the same time, to be also aware and even talking to the whole of us. And it's an inner position that I'm just talking from my own experience, because I think it helps to facilitate this. Because when we do this, there's also a kind of a resonance of the consciousness that you're in. Even on screen, there's a resonance of the consciousness that you're in. And when you're conscious of the space of the whole conversation of the 120 people that we are, there is also an invitation to this space. So the facilitator not basically losing the whole, but being with the whole at the same time as we're talking individually, allows all of us to be aware of all three dimensions.
Yeah, maybe not consciously, but it's there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Stuart, I want to make sure that you have a chance to talk, because you had your hand raised all yesterday.
Thank you so much. This is such a pleasure to be with you guys. Both as this last woman who was just speaking, and you were addressing, right, the quality with which you're both presenting the information and responding to us is modeling so much. You know, what you're speaking about, I'm deeply moved and humbled. You know, my training is as a massage therapist, and then, you know, massage therapist, you know, there's a lot that's about directing and fixing, right? And, you know, besides holding space for what wants to emerge within the system of the individual, right? And in the treatment room with one person, I'm pretty good at kind of going back and forth between that, right? And I'm so conscious in this training in the last few days how to facilitate groups in this question of leading, quote unquote. Even the term leading is kind of right, versus facilitating and inviting. That's so like a new language for me, and what's blossoming in my awareness as I'm listening to you guys in the last 10 minutes is that it's not just about, you know, I was asking the people in my breakout group who do this kind of circle work, right? Where there's a whole, what I like to say, the ethos and the logos of that culture is around protocols that really model the values of what you're all talking about. And part of me wants like a little checklist. So I know all the rules, you know, not to do it, but I'm also realizing that it's a lot of inner work in my own capacity to just, I don't know, you know, kind of heal those parts of myself that still have a little charge around the questions of leading, deeply being with. And I mean, it's not a coincidence that as a white man in this group, I'm what, 5% of who shows up here? So, you know, I'm just so humbled and wanted to name all those things, you know, here in the circle, and that what you guys are offering is so kind of radical in a lot of ways, and yet so pure.
Thank you, Stuart.
Thank you, Stuart. I think I want to make a comment about the circle protocols, because you may want to use those in the groups that you create. be aware that in a space like this, it makes it less possible to engage in the co-creative kind of synergetic coming together of the group when you give each person a bell or offer a talking stick, even imaginarily.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
That you end up cutting off the potential for synergy.
Right. Right.
But that also takes training.
Yeah.
Takes
Yeah.
attention, takes intention, takes a certain, as you were saying, vulnerability to being here and a group that respects each other.
Yeah. Yeah. So maybe in the follow-up email that you send, maybe you could include some little guides for more learning, further learning for those of us with questions like this.
Okay, thank you.
We can do that. We
Yeah,
also do have a training for this. So.
Yeah, well, you may see me there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Someone who wants to come in directly, or otherwise there's still people who have their hands up. Maybe Carol, you had your hands up. Carol Xu.
Yes, thank you. Oh, that there are two Carols. Yeah, sure. Let her go. She probably raised hands before me.
I don't know. Okay? So I saw your first, so.
Oh, okay. All right. I'll be fast. Just to build on what Marge mentioned, that question, I actually experimented a lot. I don't think it's just a technical question, because normally when we have in-person conversations, we have eye-to-eye contact, and that's actually very important. And then when I first come to the online space, it did throw me off with this, I'm looking at the screen, and that person is looking at me on the screen. Therefore, that person is not looking at me in my eye, into my eyes. So here, I just want to, kind of test with you. So right now, what do you see? Like, where my eyes are looking at?
At us.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. So the little trick is you find where your camera is on your computer and you look into that, but then that means the speaker is actually not looking at people directly on Zoom on the grid. But then if now I'm shifting my eyes to look at Marge on my screen, and what do you see?
I see you looking somewhere else.
You're looking. Yeah. So I'm actually looking at Marge. So this is what I've been kind of experimenting with myself. If I want to really build that connection with somebody and really listen to them, I need to look into the camera in my laptop. But then I need to also, like what Thomas was saying, the Gestalt kind of attention to also have the corner of my eyes to look at that person, and sometimes shift my eye to like a Marge or whoever that I want to talk to a little bit, to just see, their hand gestures. But if I want to form that connection, I look into the camera. So that's just a little bit trick. And I want, I would love people to share other little things that they noticed. So I'm so glad this came up, because it's something that I struggle with.
No, thank you.
Thank you.
My recommendation would be not to do that. Because, and this is just, there are different ways how to go about this. The way I think and feel about this, it's more important where my intention is than where really my eyes are. Because when I'm looking in the camera, my attention is in the camera. But when I'm looking in your face, I'm much more with you. And we have to learn on screen that this means something different. And it is, I understand it's a little awkward, but my really opening to you is more authentic, is more real when I see you and not the camera. because it's kind of a technical thing in between. So in order to do this, I look at the camera because I know when the camera, that's all kind of thinking, that's all mental. But to really open up to you, I look in your face as I do right now. And maybe it doesn't look like that I'm looking in your face, but I think something is transmitting that in fact I really see you right now. And this is much more direct, much more authentic. And my recommendation would be to learn together that things work slightly different on screen and not have this mental tricks to help us, because in fact they more than not come in the way to be spontaneous with each other. But there are different ways how to do this. It's just my recommendation would be look where your heart goes.
I heard an inclusivity in what Carol was saying, where it was like an experiment around possibilities and kind of breaking the either or of it by experimenting with where focus with physical eyes goes and where focus with kind of the inner eye and the also peripheral vision goes. And I like the idea of the possibilities that opens.
But I think for each of us to experiment with that, because I think that's, I mean, all of this is a big experiment, because this is such a new realm to bring humanness to. So we're going to have to find new protocols, new expectations. We're going to have to define that. I know one person has mentioned that to every once in a while put your, stay with the image that you see on the screen for the heart-to-heart connection. Maybe every once in a while look in the camera, but as people have said, we're not looking at the camera. We're looking at the beings that are responsive in front of us. And that seems to transmit something.
Yeah. So right now, with Nicole, I'm not looking at my camera. But I much agree with you. The experiment and see what works. We all.
I've really found that in certain situations that a person who is having a hard time connecting, if I just say something like, hey, I'm going to look into my camera for a minute, and that's going to give you the image that I'm looking into your eyes, and see if we can connect, like get you deeper into connection that way.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
Yeah, just one more thing is maybe it's also I totally understand this kind of, intention, and I really love it. I think that definitely supplemented with what I was thinking. But then it's just one thing is maybe the distance actually from between where you sit and the camera also plays a role, because what I'm noticing is you two sit maybe a little further. So then when you look, whether you look directly in the camera and versus the whole grid can be a little different. So then people actually can really tell where you're looking at. And that I thought it was a good thing. If you sit a little distant from it, then I don't know.
Oh, thank you. But Carol Shinnick, you wanted first to speak.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted to share a little experience from the group. When I welcomed people to my part of the space, this is my office, and it's also my home, and a sanctuary for me where nobody's been in 3 months. Nobody's come. I've had no guests, and probably won't for a long, long time. So that's the reality of it, and it makes me a little lonely. So having Zoom visitors has been wonderful. But in the last group was especially wonderful. They were lovely, lovely people. And I want to say her name correctly. I think it's Eily, E-I-L-Y in Canada. I just drew a blank. Played her harp. Now, what she didn't know, nobody knew at the time, I have above me, the tenants in the house above me, there's a domestic abuse situation going on. So for 3 months, there's been police calls. Some of them I made myself. And the first time I called, the person was screaming, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Now this is in March. So you have to understand how traumatic that was. And so the police have been here 3 times, and it's very unsettling on top of everything else. I live outside Washington, where it's been very active, and the coronavirus and so forth. So I want to say thank you to Eiley, because when she played the harp, it was like a blessing on my space, which will continue to be unsettling. They're not going to change. They can't be evicted. I can't move. But it's that kind of an experience that I want to share, was part of it. And I'm very grateful for the harp playing and for all the wonderful people who are in my group. I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting us into your space, Carol.
Thank you.
Matt?
Hi, thank you. I am feeling like the shared space very strongly. I can barely remember my name. Feels like, and in the small group, I felt the same way. And I felt invited by each invitation and felt the shared space more and more. But then some of the people in the group shared that I don't feel the shared space, or it's not happening for me. And if it's not happening for everybody, what is it that I'm feeling? And how can I be with people who aren't feeling the shared space so strongly, and yet it's so strong in me?
Matt, could you speak up a little bit? It's difficult to hear you.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But we could hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, but
we heard you before.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, sorry. So, and like right now, it's like, oh man, I feel like I'm disappearing practically. There's so much space. But it doesn't mean that the people that I'm with online in the same group will be feeling the same way. And there's like a sadness and a frustration around that. So what's I thought this is shared, but it's not. And I guess there's a bigger shared space where some people will be feeling a certain way versus others will be feeling a certain way. Yeah, not really a question, but I guess even the experience of the shared space can be an individual thing.
No, I appreciate what you're saying, Matt, and what you're saying, that there's maybe also another shared space, I think is a good hint in this, because there is also a shared space where we can appreciate our otherness. There's a shared space where we feel the sharedness of the space, but there is also, this is something that we have to appreciate in any kind of meeting, and also in these online meetings, where otherness is part of this. Where I meet you and you have an experience I don't have, and I have an experience you don't have, and we can appreciate this.
Right.
And it does not have to go away. The otherness can be part of this. And there's a tension, because otherness has always kind of, I want to reach out, but sometimes we can do that, and sometimes we can not do. But just to appreciate that, hold something, and is in itself a shared space. And I just appreciate that otherness can be a part of this. And it's not necessarily a nice feeling, because it can hold, but when we hold this, we can hold more.
But also, different people have different sensing capacities within this space, and or are focused on different aspects of this of our sharedness and being together. And in that there can be a richness that also can have the tension in it, as Thomas was saying, and as you have experienced. But it's as a facilitator, you may be facilitating a group of people who one, it's not appropriate to talk about this as consciousness or shared awareness, because it's not where the group is working from or is interested in. And your own being in touch with that the dimension between us, regardless, is part of the glue that holds the meeting together, that holds the possibility for the group as a whole. So we're looking for ways of sharing and layering on top of each other differences of experience that allow us to share in our attention and intention in being together. And that will be manifested in different ways by different people. But it's calling people to share and not calling people to be the same.
Yeah, that's good. I love it. Thank you.
And having said that, I also see that it would be time now for our break.
And the right time.
On the right time this time. And we would suggest to do this. So it's 5:30 here in Germany. And we would suggest that we meet, that we have break for half an hour and meet again at the top of the hour. And again, we suggest to have a break from screen, maybe go out, maybe if it's sunny, join the sun. If it's rainy, join the rain, or have a look outside, or have a cup of tea. If you have a pet, join your pet. Just allow also the other senses to have their time so that we can come rejuvenated back in half an hour to continue this session. So thank you very much, and we will see each other in half an hour.
Hello.
We hope you had a good break.
You maybe got some fresh air. It's beautifully sunny here, with a nice breeze.
Seems Marianne has some sun in her face.
It's freezing here.
Oh,
really?
I'm having a hot chocolate.
Oh, nice. I'm glad you have looks like a hot beverage with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just arrive again in the space, and by arriving the space, we are also opening the space, re-initiating the space in between us.
Yeah, bringing our attention to being with each other, being here, being present, being curious. What's going to happen next? Who will I meet here? What will I learn? And in that open curiosity and presence, being present.
We will have another hour. We also want to have one more breakout group in this hour.
Yeah. So, but we want to talk first for a few minutes about some of the themes for today, about diversity, particularly about diversity and integration and rhythm and tempo. Oh, there's our harp. Aha, I hadn't seen you today before now. Yay, there she is, the harp. So in terms of the things that we wanted to cover today, lighting in space, it seems that we've gone over in one way or another, that you are inviting people to your space and being aware of where you're inviting people into and what spaces we're sharing. And our spaces being an opening to our lives, but also our culture, and that can have that can cut in two ways. One, it can be an invitation in to your, you could say, your home and your homeland, or the place where you're living. But which also reveals, I think, as we said yesterday, it reveals class differences. It reveals cultural differences. And depending on the groups that you work with, you want to maintain your sensitivity about that. What are you showing about your life with your background? And that it's important to consider when planning Zoom meetings in your consulting practice or your counseling practice or in your workshops. We've touched on that quite a bit, but diversity and integration and rhythm and tempo are two aspects of how we move together and to be aware of as we're creating the conversations that we want to have in this Zoom space. And this is less about one-on-one engagement, which has its own rhythm and its own connectivity, but more about group settings. That in a group setting, to really to think about allowing in the diversity of experience and moderating that with integration. And we spoke in the first part of this session also about modes of integration can be singing, breathing, silence, that these kinds of things create integration, but so does calling for themes. What are the common themes that we've heard? Even sharing our perception of the light in our different rooms can bring an integrating property. And the integrating makes the connectivity, the intersubjective, the interbeing dimension more tangible, and the diversity makes it more rich.
And when we talk about rhythm and tempo, we would like to start with something very simple, very basic that everyone knows, but usually we are relating to it not on a really conscious level. That every meeting has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there is an appropriateness how to start. There's an appropriateness in the middle, and there's appropriateness in the end, bringing things together, letting things come to a closure. So to be aware of this and to model the way you facilitate the meeting, being aware that an opening is an opening, then there's a rhythm, there's a dramaturgy to this meeting that's also dependent on what is happening in this meeting. And ideally, in the end, there's something like a closure where things become full, become round, where you can let it land. But at the same time, there is also the understanding of the right tempo of conversation. Sometimes a conversation has to speed up. Sometimes a conversation has to slow down. Sometimes it's a time for a break, just a moment. When we talk about this in our trainings, we talk about the musical intelligence of a dialogue. Like any kind of music piece, and everyone who plays music together, may it be if you play jazz or you play classic quartet together, you know there's a certain rhythm, a certain togetherness where you find each other. And in fact, any form of dialogue is also, and it's an interesting way to think about it, it's a form of music you play together. It's a form of art. A conversation is not different than playing together with an instrument. It also has the additional dimension of meaning, sharing, togetherness, but it also has the kind of, do we create resonance? Is there rhythm? Do we fragment? Does the conversation fall apart? Does it come together again? And to be aware of this, that this is something we can consciously work with, be aware with, and something is going too fast. slow down. When something is too slow, to speed it up.
And we're saying this in the context of designing what you're doing online with Zoom for the sake of being able to accentuate the shared presence. That if you want to just share information, that's one thing. Here's another thing. Here's 0.5, here's 0.6, here's 0.7. That kind of talk about, get it out, there you have it. But if you're talking about if you want to create this connective presence, this shared presence, being aware of these different dimensions, being aware of the rhythm and tempo, what allows for the space to be present with you, this third factor that you were speaking of before, Thomas. What allows the sharing, the part that we share, to come to the fore. So it's working with these different elements and becoming aware of what a conversation or a meeting might need in order to amplify the presence, the shared presence and connectivity.
And one way to support this is to be also very aware of the silent part in the conversation. Particularly when there's a conversation, let's say the 5 of us, the 7 of us, the 10 of us, where everyone is very visible. There is the tendency in conversations that there is a kind of a division between the people who talk and the people who don't talk. And this division between the people who talk and the people who don't talk has a self-amplifying dynamic. And it creates something that disunifies this space. And at the same time, we want to respect also people who want to stay silent. And it's also fine if people want to share, but to help when people start to talk too much, to find a way to make us conscious that maybe too much is too much, and also to invite people, not to force people, but to invite people to enter the space, to create this unity, because particular in an online space, it's very much easier to kind of fall apart in the conversation. And by holding this, that the silent part and the talking part are not falling apart, are not fragmenting, makes the big difference.
And actually, that's something that that I'm sure all of us have the experience. You see it almost in every group conversation. That there's the silent group and then there's the talking group. And for some people, it may be a surprise that you find yourself in the talking or the non-talking group because you have a more of a comfort with sharing, and so you find yourself in a group now that you're not sharing in. But it's an impersonal thing, to put it that way. It seems to be a universal part of human conversation, that this is what happens. So even just pointing that out, like almost every conversation, that ends up that there are people who are participating more verbally and people who are holding the silence, and often even just naming that it really is, it's not a problem. It's not that anyone has to speak, but to bring that to awareness can often create room and awareness on both sides that to change that dynamic if people want to.
And there's one more element that we just want to bring in. And again, it's a very simple one, and we all of it know it, but it is even more helpful in online conversations than in on-site conversations. It's to follow one thread. Meaning, there's a tendency in conversations that we don't have one conversation, but I put my conversation out, the next one put his conversation out, the third one puts her conversation out, but basically we're all having our own private conversations. We're not
in a group,
but we're not weaving something together. So to find ways to follow a thread, or to weave a thread to build up, which has all the elements. It has to have diversity, but it also has to have the element to come together. Otherwise, it's not a conversation. It's just everyone making statements, staying on their own.
And actually, that reminds me that as you're saying that is an important role of the facilitator. Often, sometimes there will be a member of your group that will do this naturally, but that in the diversity of responses, to consciously do the weaving, consciously weave together. It's like, oh, what Ron said and what Fran said really relate in this way, or however you hear it, or we all seem to be talking about this together in our different ways, to keep working between diversity and integration that way. And that often is a very important part of the facilitator role, particularly in this space, because it's so easy for people to check out, and it's so sensitive to the presence of our awareness and attention or not. But with that, we'd like to move into a new breakout group. It's going to be slightly larger and slightly longer. Through the course of the program, we are each breakout group is a little bit harder than the last one to manage. And we're doing that intentionally so that you develop you develop your capacities to sense and to work in a group. You're going to have to work together in this group. It'll be, it's 20 minutes. There'll be 6 to 7 of you in the group. The larger the group is, the more diversity, the more complex that becomes. The longer time you have, the more complex that gets, because there's more that goes on. And we want you to have a conversation, just simply have a conversation about what creates human connection.
But at the same time, as you have this simple conversation, what creates human connection, we also would like to experiment with what we just brought in. How a conversation has a beginning, how a conversation has a middle, how a conversation has an end, the rhythm of it, the breadth of it, the diversity of it, the following a thread, and how we can weave this together to just practice all of this while you also have a thing to talk about, what creates human connection.
Yeah, and to be clear, don't talk about rhythm and tempo and diversity and integration, do it.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to work together and be very respectful and be very, and invite each other into the conversation in the ways that you want to go. That's going to take something. But I hope that you can bring your mutual respect and care for the space between you in order to be able to hold this conversation, even though it may be awkward, bumpy, and you may not know how to do it.
Yeah. And we hope you forgive us that we, so to say, just throw you into the water and ask you to kind of experiment with it. But it is the most direct way to kind of have the chance to use this online space with people who want to use this online space to learn together how to do this in this context. Much more than we can tell you is by finding out together how to do this. We always find that this is the most valuable time of this whole course.
Yeah. So, what creates human connection, and create it as you're talking about it. It's not a talk about over there. This is how human creation or human connection is created. It's bring in your response to that and manifest it. Make it so, as I think Luc Picard used to say. So is that clear? Yeah.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
All right.
Thank you. Looking forward to hear from you afterwards.
Nice to have you all pop back in.
And we hope you had a great coming together.
So right now, what we would like, let's say, I think we're not quite all here. Oh,
Yeah.
We are? Okay. Right now, what we'd like you to do is we're going to just sit in silence and reflect for 3 minutes about what worked in your group in terms of diversity and integration, rhythm and tempo. What did you notice? How did it work? What helped? What helped create human connection in your group? So we want to have a conversation about the process and how it relates to these different ways of working. And so no chatting during this time, and no chat in the chat box. Just sit quietly, reflect. You can take notes for yourself, something, but look at it from a kind of meta perspective. How did diversity and integration work in your group? How did rhythm and tempo? What about flow?
Okay, thank you. And we would love to hear from you.
Yeah, sharing from this more meta level. What worked? How did diversity and integration, rhythm and tempo, flow work in your group? What did you notice? What helped? What didn't help? And maybe we can hear from some voices we haven't heard from before. Alana, we haven't heard from you, I don't think. Alana, do you want to unmute yourself?
We started off in silence without any leader, actually. We just gazed upon each other. And what was going on inside me is I immediately looked to see what we had in common, which was we were all white women. And then I was pondering about where would the diversity come if we had men and people of color. So the immediate thing was that I went into what I had in common with people versus what my challenge, not my challenge, but missing the diversity. We kind of talked about that throughout the time. And then someone asked the question about what would it be like if we had men in the group? And what came out of my mind, came out of my mouth was, I would find that we all had the same intention.
Mm.
So, and that to me is important because voices, the men that I hear, as well as the people from different countries and stuff, is we all have the same intention of caring about humanity and how can we enter into transformation together.
Thanks, Alana. So you're talking about actually working. See, diversity is not simply race, culture. It's also just the multiplicity of us. I mean, we tend in our culture to have it only mean that, but it's you were a diverse group of people. You're all different.
Right. I would agree that the door was opened up, got my attention because of gender and of color, but I would totally agree that diversity is in multiple layers. And commonality is also.
Yes, right. And to work those two together, create something together. Great.
For the sake of the whole, because it's so rich.
Exactly. Exactly.
Catherine
Bertrand.
Part of our conversation focused on the fact that really it is so much more about your heart than your head. That if you truly feel and have the sense of connection, it's at that deeper level than just a cerebral affirmation of something. And that sometimes that's as much a physical response as it is that emotional one. And I think what I continue to learn is that the pace is so critical. And as you've noted, the context certainly makes a difference, but that ability to be slow enough that it becomes less about what I say and more about what I'm hearing. So that in that deeper listening, you really have an opportunity to connect the dots. And I don't mean just the key points or the learnings or whatever, but that deeper sense of knowing that can happen in that claimed space. So I think that's some of what we shared, and we had some further conversation about how critical is it to see each other. And there were some great examples of situations where something failed with Zoom or the camera went out or something, and what even was able to come about as a result because of that deeper ability to and that desire to really to listen, to experience, and to trust.
Thank you, Catherine. Now we'll leave space so that if somebody wants to unmute and come in, they can. And if not, then we'll call on someone who has their hand raised.
In the group that I was in, we talked a lot about how people are seen and connect. And for me, I think about the impersonal nature of tweets and emails as opposed to a personal letter. And I think about different ways of receiving information through my eyes and my ears and tactily. And I'm a former teacher, so I do a lot of reading body language. So for me, the medium that we are using leaves me wanting more real information than simply a talking head. I talk to my group about how I want to see more of my body, or their bodies. We talked about how, for me, seeing all these faces looking at me makes me feel very vulnerable, and I'm not really anxious to share with all of these eyes on me. But if I go to speaker view, it feels easier for me. Or if maybe some people turn off their cameras while I'm speaking, and vice versa. So there are different ways for me of making that connection. Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Is it okay for me to talk now?
Actually, let's, if we can go, you can come in next, Sheila. Let's go to Catherine from North Carolina, who had her hand up, so we can alternate between the pop-ins and the hand raises.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Thomas. This is wonderful. I've noticed you haven't told us when we go into our small groups, and this relates a little to flow. You haven't said anything to us about, oh, this one should start first, you know, the one with name beginning with A or whatever it might be. And I'm wondering, you know, most of us in this group are facilitators or leaders in some way. And so it's perhaps easier for us to start and to get a conversation flowing. But I'm wondering for people who are not used to speaking up, when you put them into a group and they don't know who should go first, there's no, the teacher hasn't given any instructions. You know, I'm sure you do it for a reason. I'd love to know a little bit more about how it helps with the flow, or whether there's another way to get the flow of conversation started, or whether you just want to leave it to synchronicity with the group.
In fact, there's a reason, and what you say is true. It makes it easier to basically start with a certain name or whatever, to give kind of rules how to do that. But rules make it easier, but they also make it more difficult to really be self-reliant in the way we come in. It's more challenging, but what happens, because it's very much dependent, being you're in this group, there are no rules how to do this, so you have to find your own way, and it's more challenging to do it. But if you succeed on a different level of interaction, and something is possible. And again, it's context dependent. There are contexts where I would help people to do that. But in a context like this, where I trust you that there's enough agency in this space to find your own way. The quality of conversation is different when you don't give too many rules how to do this.
But really, that is context dependent. If you're working with teenagers, you're working with different groups of people, you might say, yeah, the first person who, or the last person who comes into the space is the person who starts, or something. But that's something that you will need to decide based on the context. This is, as we say, what we're doing here is meant for you as facilitators, therapists, people who work with other people. It's not meant to be, this is how it goes, period. This is the way it should work. So thank you.
Thank you.
So Sheila.
Okay, so I wanted to speak a little bit to our process in the group. And it was suggested that we start out with our names and where we were from. So we got an opportunity to see each person, hear their voice, and see the space that they were in, which was a comfortable way to begin. And then we had quiet as we sort of felt into, well, who would want to go first and talk? And then a person began, and then we had another pause, and then it got to be, the pauses became less, and we flowed more in our conversation and tied things together. And then there was normal pause again, every once in a while. And by the end, it was very comfortable, and people felt that they could speak, and it was a nice experience. So.
Yeah, sounds beautiful. But do you see, even from the beginning, you started with, here we are as each individual, each person, that's diversity. And then silence, you came together in that. It wasn't your silence and someone else had another silence. You were together in that. And then you were creating a rhythm between the two that allowed you to develop more and more confidence about speaking together and letting it go and flow. And you can orchestrate that as a facilitator in your own context. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila.
Nancy, you had your hand up. Are you still present? Nancy, I think you took your hand down.
Yes, I'm here.
Did you want to speak, or you had?
Sure. Yes. So I'm hearing the word diversity a lot, and I just wanted to share the simplest definition I have ever heard for diversity is any difference that makes a difference.
Nice.
It's not only gender or only skin color, it's how we communicate directly or indirectly, how we share emotion, how we experience grief, and that I might be sitting next to someone who looks like me, and yet we can be very, very diverse. And so I go back to that all the time because it's so simple. It's simply a difference that makes a difference.
Yeah, that's very helpful. I think we load a lot on the conversation around gender and race in a way that then assumes that everyone from one race is the same, or one person represents all race, all gender. It doesn't, and that's not helpful to the conversation, I don't think.
Because interesting enough, this way of talking about diversity assumes conformity on the other side, which is just not true. And I like your definition very much.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay.
Ariane, Pacific Grove.
Thank you. So the response that arose for me to the question of what creates or cultivates connection was acceptance, that whatever is here is in service in some way. And as the facilitator or as a member of the group, that's the skill of the weave, is finding how this stitch is part of the whole that we're creating. And so surprises are welcome, technology challenges are welcomed. You know, there's nothing that's against us when we're in that allowing everything that arises to arise.
Thank you, Marianne.
Yeah, very nice. Josie.
Okay, I was just hearing the thunderstorm outside. What struck me in our group was the way story pulled at our interest as well. We had a story from Polly in the beginning about the fact that she hadn't been here for the 2 hours before, and so that took us on a journey. That story took us on a journey, and then there was a story towards the end from Laurie that took us on another journey, which was about something completely different. But there was something about the way we all became engaged with story as well that seemed like something very, because this is such a primal thing with us human beings, the telling of stories and connection through story, that I thought was really beautiful, actually. And another tech moment where we all suddenly laughed at once because something was discovered and revealed, and that laughter as well. That those moments that you can't predict are going to happen. You don't know that story is going to come through. You don't even know you're going to tell it. But it arises in that space. I thought that was great.
I think what you're saying about how when the story arises in that space, there's something then that the story is given to the space, rather than the story being my thing.
That's right.
Me. And I think there's a subtle difference in that particularly in this context really is really important. When the story arises or it's given to the whole, and it's an open story rather than a closed story about my experience and in some ways why that marks how I am different from you. And oftentimes when people get lost in their own story, it really creates a a complex situation in the group. But it sounds like you worked well. It was part of the weaving.
Yeah, it was definitely part of the weaving.
Yeah.
Because when we are aware of this shared space, it also becomes very visible how a story can help this space, or the other way around, it can dominate the space. So the separate story takes over and basically takes the space of the space. So our shared awareness that we have a shared space, you can see how a story can be of service to open up something between us. But the story can also create a domination or a separation. In that sense, the use of story is a very powerful tool. And only the shared space allows us to what degree it can be of service to what we want to create here together. But then it really is a very powerful way to do this.
Yeah. I think there was something about the way everybody connected, you know, even just very slightly with the story, especially the second story, the one near the end, that made it feel as if there was it wasn't about dominating, it was about contributing and being part of it, and there was something very shared about it.
Yeah,
sounds became very shared.
Yeah.
In terms of experience, so we were all individual, but we all felt connected to it.
Yeah, great. Sounds like a perfect example of using the story in a collective context.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. And unfortunately, we're at the end of our time today. Yikes. It went fast, didn't it? And I know people have a couple of people have their hands up. I'm sorry, we'll have to put your hand up tomorrow, and we look forward to seeing you for our last session tomorrow afternoon, morning, evening, whatever time it is. And we will again open the breakout groups so that you can go back into them and hang out, or you can hang out here. I think people were talking for an hour, was it? Afterwards, which is great. And we'd like to just say again that we are very happy to give this as a gift to all of you, to empower your work in this time of social isolation. And if you can and you're able to and feel so inclined, we appreciate any donation that you might want to make.
It really helps our work, but at the same time, it's meant to be a gift. So feel free also just to take it as a gift. If you feel inclined to give a donation, of course, we are very happy.
So we'll see you tomorrow, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
See you tomorrow.
Thank you, Elizabeth.